Good afternoon and welcome to the KEFI Gold and Copper PLC investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time by the Q&A tab situated in the right-hand corner of your screen. Just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company can review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so. Before we begin, I'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to Harry Agnes-Darris-Adams. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, and thank you for everyone who's joined. I'm aware that there are some shareholders as well as some non-shareholders participating. So if I do touch on anything that some of you already know, please forgive me. That is for the benefit of people who might be new. Those who have followed us know, by the way, I should apologise for my croaky voice and excuse me having a sip of water. Occasionally, I think I've had COVID one too many times, and there's a little crackle in my throat I just can't shake off. Anyhow, we've focused on the Arabian-Nubian Shield since 2008, and I've heard about the Arabian-Nubian Shield since I was in my 20s, a long time ago, because of its similarities in geology, where most of the gold and other minerals come from in Australia and Canada, but it's under exploitation in a modern sense. So despite ancient mining there going back thousands of years, the modern industry is only just waking up or being allowed to engage, probably more the point. Anyhow, we've been there 15 years, and in that 15 years, it'd be fair to say we've suffered many frustrations, learned many lessons, but over the last 2 years, things have turned for the better. And we are one of the people, if you like, at the forefront of the industry. And the two countries we focused on are Saudi Arabia and Ethiopia. We have joint ventures in each, one with a very large family office, a globally leading family office, and in Ethiopia with the government. Now, when we first arrived, there were few outside foreign companies engaging, and this image gives you an impression of some of the better known companies that have engaged, including the world's two largest gold producers, and many other very well-known companies and explorers and producers. For example, of note in particular for Ethiopia is that the largest mining IPO for a good decade, I think globally, but certainly in North America, was that of Allied Gold a few months ago, which raised $260 million to put into its Ethiopian project. And perhaps the most high profile companies that are engaged in the region now would be Newmont and Barrick. And indeed, I can see we don't even have on the list perhaps one of the most prolific explorers in the world, and that's the Ivanhoe Group, which have now come into Saudi Arabia. A corporate snapshot. I won't go over all these details now, so we can, if you like, not waste time getting to questions. But we have, as a company, a beneficial interest in about a bit over 1 million ounces in each country. The first cab off the rank for development is the high-grade Tulu Kapi gold mine, over 2 gram open pit and 5 gram underground. Very conventional project, very conventional processing plant. And I'll elaborate on that a little bit later. Some of the projections summarized on this slide are particularly important. because just that first project, the majority-owned Tulu Kapi project, which is in the midst of its financing now for launch, will generate, based on the signed-off numbers, at consensus forecast gold price of about $1,800 per ounce, would generate about $50 million, 50 million pounds, 54 million pounds per annum. It's KEFI's account net after everything, which obviously is more than our market cap today. That's just a very simple, if you like, highlight of the sort of returns we're pursuing from these projects. That's just the Tulu Kapi project. In an NPV sense, it represents today a bit over 3 pence per KEFI share, which is what is that, five times the share price, something like that, 4 or 5 times the share price, without even looking at our projects in Saudi Arabia, where we have a very almost the same endowment as a beneficial interest, with 2 projects coming along behind the Ethiopian one for development. I won't go through the details here, but Tulu Kapi I've mentioned in Ethiopia, and over in Saudi Arabia, our 2 discoveries, the gold Jebel Qutman and the copper gold Hawiyah, coming along behind. Between them, in aggregate, much bigger than Tulu Kapi already, and still growing, so to speak, through drilling, but also because we only own a minority stake in them, the beneficial interest to KEFI is about the same as that in Tulu Kapi. And a growth pipeline in both countries. Now, very difficult to convey in words, in talking like this, the different sentiment that applies today compared to any time that I've been personally coming to the region regularly, monthly, if not more often, over the last decade myself. The excitement, the momentum, the driven commitment to launch projects, finance projects, build an industry is palpable today in both countries. You would only need to visit, meet a few people over the course of the day and you'd feel it. That's never been the case in my experience before. Changes of law, inviting investors and companies to engage, any number of things I could quote. So in many respects, we've learned from experience, we've learned it the hard way, that one can make discoveries, one can make acquisitions, one can make plans, but unless the environment is conducive to get going, extremely difficult, no matter what people intend, no matter what goodwill is towards you, extremely difficult until the general environment turns to the positive, which it has done over the last 2 years and last year in particular. So we have 3 development projects in the queue, 1 majority owned, 2 minority owned in Saudi, and a pipeline of exploration coming along behind them, a fairly healthy book, so to speak, and with the wind at our back for the first time. Now, a company that starts very small as an explorer, we started as a £2 million AIM explorer, to have, if you like, the global credibility to attract major international investors, contractors, government as partner, leading family offices as partner. It needs to do things in an exemplary fashion with independent sign-offs, because albeit that the individuals within the company might have had any number of years of experience here, there, and everywhere. The company itself hasn't. It started as an explorer, and it's discovered projects, and now we're developing projects. So we make a point of independent sign-offs on the way through from global brand names for each discipline. Now, all that little step function going up from the bottom left to the top right, that's all been done. And what is being done now at Tulu Kapi has been followed for years is security. Constellas, we've had them tagging us, I think since 2015 or 16. That's really the only sort of worrisome issue we have, albeit that it's come way down in importance and concern as the country settled right down and things are moving now. But everything else been signed off, and the only thing left to sign off is just a witness that we prepare the community and start making arrangements all safe and sound and everything's moving and flowing so that the independent experts can give a big tick to that as well. And that will happen month to month over the next few months. Milestones achieved last year, I won't go through them, not to waste your time at this forum, but the bottom line is that we're extremely busy ticking boxes, the different boxes to tick off. Sounds a bit flippant to say that. Hell of a lot of work went into each box. And the major conditions precedent to launching the project were all satisfied. I'll come to what we have to do now in a moment. But basically, we took everything from nothing yet being approved, everything needing to be updated, some laws needing to be changed, particularly with foreign exchange controls, all of those things being done, and the lead bank approving final credit committee approval by the end of last year. That was really the marker for us to move into launch mode. As I said, I'll come to the 2024 task list shortly. Over in Saudi Arabia, we're really up to our necks in 2 feasibility studies on 2 development projects, both of them discoveries of our company, and you know, an excellent team, a highly driven group of professionals working through those studies, through the myriad of issues under each topic to prepare each of them for commitment for development. Comparative valuation benchmarks, any which way you look at it. Well, first of all, let me say that other than the bottom right-hand corner graph, the other 3 are relative value measures against analog companies. So the first thing I would say is that the actual analyst who does this work pointed out that since 2 years ago, when we asked that firm to do this sort of work and other industry research for us, the number of benchmarks in Africa of analog companies has halved from roughly 25 to about half today. That's because there's been a consolidation of the industry with takeovers of smaller companies by the majors. What that means is that, to me at least, the majors are moving in big time, and as the difficulty of the stock markets in the last few years has made it very difficult for juniors to raise the capital for development, they've been taken over to achieve that through the balance sheets of majors. That's my interpretation. Anyhow, be that as it may, where we stand today, you can see, is a very low price compared to benchmarks, comparatives. And as we de-risk and move forward, we will climb those curves. The bottom right-hand slide is just the grade of the principal deposit compared to the rest, showing you that we're relatively high grade. Now, I'm sorry this looks a bit busy, but if we were funding everything from the stock market, there would be one box on that chart, and that would be the KEFI box. Well, I suppose, and as shareholders, 2 boxes. And because we're effectively doing all our financing in subsidiaries, with the minimal of exceptions, it gets more complicated down below with partners and bankers and mezzanine financiers and so on. And, you know, in terms of, how would I put it, stakeholder responsibility, the company has obviously its fiduciary responsibility for to its shareholders, and indeed to the other parties from whom most of the money is coming. We have a deep and seriously taken responsibility to our partners who rely on us as the technical partner, to our bankers, albeit that they might be putting the loans into subsidiaries. They do look to the technical partner to be accountable to provide human and capital resources as required. To mezzanine and other financiers down below. Once again, ironically, there's more capital available down in Ethiopia, and perhaps not so ironically also down in Saudi Arabia, than there is in the stock market for mining. However, only as long as we honour our responsibilities to all these stakeholders. I only say that because it's sometimes a little bit difficult to understand the pace and language of our reporting, and I only highlight it because we have to be and be seen to be good fiduciaries for all the stakeholders, particularly when the ones who are not on the public share register are putting up most of the capital. Milestones ahead. This is a bit more important, and I'll dwell on a couple of points here. So having had final credit committee approval of the lead bank on the Tula Kapi project, and the lead equity investors there as well, the equivalent approval there, the other syndicate members are going through their approval processes. That was sort of like a trigger, if you like. Not so much that everyone piggybacks on one person's or one party's approval, but obviously unless the leads approve, there's not much point the rest of them doing their approval process. That has happened, and we're now into that. That also allowed us to trigger engagement with the local authorities and the local community to lay out the plans for resettlement. It doesn't mean to say resettlement will be executed before financial close. It just means that we have to make sure that everyone agrees, and it's compulsory resettlement. It's not a discussion in that sense, but it is a discussion in the sense of consultation to ensure it's done fairly, properly, completely transparently, and in compliance with the highest world standards. Satisfaction of conditions precedent. The keys to keep an eye on our security, and the other things that are close to the heart of anyone making hundreds of millions of dollars of commitments, or as a syndicate doing so. The insurances, and obviously the insurers go through and have to do their own assessments and due diligence in their good form. And then all the what you'd call legal formal satisfaction of title, confirmations, perfection of security, and so on. You know, in a country like Ethiopia, for which this is the first such transaction ever, an internationally syndicated project finance, where laws have had to be changed to accommodate it, from the federal down through regional, down through zonal. I suppose we've learned through experience that changing a government system has taken more time than we had hoped. But having done all that, really the ticking off of compliance, having done the changes of law, hopefully now is fairly straightforward, and certainly the appetite and desire is there amongst the authorities to do that. Finalisation of definitive documentation, most of it's very advanced drafting, but putting 12 different counterparties down and making sure that they're all their respective lawyers sign off, I would never underestimate the challenge of that. But all of these tasks that I've just outlined are scheduled out over the next few months. And then we move into closing and drawdown, and just calling public meetings and so on to approve anything that needs to be approved. Obviously takes a month or two, but basically you're looking at a few months between those three sets of tasks above, and then a month or two of closing procedures with different people who have to call different types of meetings to put in their capital. In the second half of the year, procurement, community resettlement, construction to be launched. And at the same time, we'd like to get going again on our exploration, both in the district and elsewhere. The government has given us informal assurance that our proximal licenses will be properly registered for us to restart the exploration that we had already begun for the good of the community, for the good of the project, for the good of all stakeholders. And we are, I suppose, whilst Ethiopia has yet to fully get cracking to the mining sector, we're doing some other work around the country, putting our foot on a few other things opportunistically. In Saudi Arabia, the work on Jibal Qutman is extremely intense, lots of debating, lots of pressure internally, resolving which way to take it, how big to build it before we trigger, and all that sort of stuff. Highly advanced feasibility work leading to the sort of pressure cooker that we're blessed to have, to be honest, having made a discovery, having had excellent team doing all the work to get it to a stage where it warrants the pressure cooker of debate about when to trigger the development. And I think by the middle of the year, that should be quite clear on Jibal Qutman. That's my prognosis. Hawiyah is coming along behind that. It's a more complex project with underground development as well, with polymetallic, so therefore more complex metallurgical processes, and it has to be given some more time. It's perhaps a year behind today's pressure cooker at Jibal Qutman. Regional exploration, well, you would be quite astounded to hear the ground holding that a couple of major explorers, global explorers, have grabbed recently, but they've just landed in the country and tried to throw a blanket with government support over anything they could, whereas we've been there 15 years building a proprietary database, cherry picking what we wanted to go after, and have made 2 discoveries. So it should be no surprise to you to learn that you couldn't get into our conference booth in the conference last week called Future Minerals Forum, where Golden Minerals, our joint venture company, had a booth. You couldn't get into it. It was so jam-packed of people wanting to get in there, wanting to talk about whether they could get involved with us. We are at the head of the pack, and we really want to take advantage of that and grow as fast as possible. Board of Directors, I won't go through them all now, but the head of a major African mining bank, Mark Tyler, former head that is, of the mining division, Richard Robinson, former operational head of Goldfields, Alistair Clark, former managing director, environmental and social for the European Bank of Development. Myself and John have worked together for the best part of 30 years, have developed many projects across a number of commodities. I think it's a reasonable board for this juncture. We two of us stand down every year for re-election. I've noticed that we've been re-elected each time with 95% plus, which I suppose means shareholders think we're doing not too bad a job despite the difficulties and disappointments of getting to this stage in these countries. But the board will be refreshed. There'll be younger people. There'll be people qualified better for the next stage. There'll be people from the regions. The board will refresh itself, continue to refresh itself regularly as we move forward. The executive committee in KEFI has grown. Perhaps I haven't made much of a song and dance about it, but some very important appointments have been made. Eddie has been organisational developing in mining companies for decades, for many majors and some juniors. Rob has been overseeing project studies for the likes of large consulting firms and BHP, as well as my predecessor companies. Norman Green has his own, or had his own. He's retired. He only works in situations which to him are worth the effort, where it's interesting and he can add value, but he's a bit of a rock star in the game of building projects for the mining sector. He's quite a mentor for our people. David used to be MD of Billiton. He's basically waiting for us to start operational readiness and operations so he can make a contribution. I'll stop there. Not sure how long I took there, Master of Ceremonies, but let's turn to the questions, please.
Perfect, Harry. Thank you very much for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab, which is situated on the top right-hand corner of your screen. Harry, we did receive a number of pre-submitted questions, so I thought I'd start with those. The first one reads as follows. What is the probabilities of funding being acquired for one of the assets in SA in 2024, especially when you voiced how much easier this route is to Ethiopia, although it seems to be taking the same time frame? And on SA, you keep saying that you wanted to be fast-tracked and so keen to invest, so what is going wrong?
Nothing's going wrong. I think if I gave the impression that you could make a discovery, get access, we only got access to Jebel Qutman, I suppose is what we're referring to, because it's the first cap in the rank for development. We only got access to the site 13 months ago, after a 7-year absence for regulatory reasons. So if I gave the impression to anybody that within 13 months we'd have drilled out the deposit, completed a DFS, done the financing and started construction, then I apologise. That's simply completely unrealistic. And I don't believe I would have given that guidance, because it would have been wrong. The rest of the question is very pertinent, and that is, is finance relatively easier? Yes. The country is very wealthy. The sovereign fund has been mandated, instructed to prioritise mining, and we're very close to the Saudi Industrial Development Fund, who've been to our sites and are looking forward to receiving submissions. We haven't triggered those submissions because we're not ready to. But yes, I think if one looks at the RNS we put out only today, you'd see an outline in some narrative of the lines we're thinking along. And essentially, for KEFI, instead of, the combined Jibal Qutman, Hawiyah developments between them might be $500-600 million. So how does KEFI spend $500-600 million? Shareholders want us to develop, but the markets have been weak, and obviously KEFI would not be provided with $500-600 million to develop these projects. So how do we do it? Well, we've accepted that we'll be a minority with a strong partner. That's a big step. We work very hard to maintain our relationship and mutual respect and support of the lending institution that I mentioned. And on top of that, there's been what I can only describe as a bit of a wave of interest for people wanting to deploy into Saudi Arabia. We may not do anything with any of them, but it's there in a shape and a form and a quantity that I've never seen before in any country. And we have the opportunity here as KEFI to participate in these ventures as long as we maintain, doing a good job for the balance of all our stakeholders. We have the opportunity here to put up a pretty small component of the total finance package. If you just work the numbers through, and I encourage you to look at today's RNS, which sort of sets it out step by step. Now, what I said before about Saudi is simple, plain truth. But if I gave you the impression that in 13 months we'd have knocked the whole thing over and been construction, that's not correct.
Perfect, Harry. Thank you very much. Next question here. What is the status of the licence areas near Tulu Kapi which were taken from KEFI?
I touched on that during the PowerPoint walkthrough that we believe that we'll get them back. We are prepared to take administrative action, legal action if we need to, but we don't think that'll be necessary.
Perfect. Thank you very much. When does Saudi need to be financed, and how will KEFI's funds be raised?
That question I just touched on, or I suppose just to elaborate a bit further, but I do encourage you to read the RNS today's, is that just if you walk through the sequencing in the RNS, you have to have a bankable project, number one, which means studies to a bankable standard with independent sign-offs and so on and so forth. Let's say 75% project financing debt, leaving 25% for equity. Of that equity portion, the partners 75-25, ATA 75, KEFI 25 would do the rest. Or they can have a look at the other alternatives on offer if they choose to take any of them, such as mezzanine finance or anything else. But we haven't got anywhere near that yet, and there's no need to do that yet. And they're just opportunities for us to evaluate as we move forward. So I think that should make sense. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. What is the status of the SIDF application in Saudi?
That's what I was saying. We haven't formally applied until we finish the DFS and all those sign-offs, but we stay very close. I don't have much to do with the day-to-day in Saudi, but actually bumped into the SIDF twice in meetings with our company in the last few days. I'm in Riyadh. So we obviously have a very close dialogue, and they're keeping a close eye on us. And I think it's all going well, but it's premature to actually lodge the formal application.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think you have touched on this, but can you explain in simple terms what further steps are now required to get full project financing?
I suppose that means for Ethiopia, Tulu Kapi. Well, I think I did go through that in the slideshow. We've got 3 concurrent sets of jobs going on, preparing the community, going through all the conditions precedent like insurances and title and security sign-off, as I said, is the key, and the legal documents to be finished from their 97% status, depending which agreement you look at, to the final ready to execute document. So I think the only comment I'd make to add to that is, because it must seem pretty long-winded to anybody, and without dwelling on the fact that the country had a civil war a few years ago, that's all history. And this Ethiopia was a top 10 growth country for 20 years running until it had those problems. And I absolutely guarantee you, I'd be staggered if it wasn't in the top 10 growth countries in the world again within the next 2 years, because it really is determined to, and it actually has to repair its economy. So we're on the rebound, if you like, in Ethiopia. And in fact, the aftershocks of those conflicts are still settling down, but they are purely aftershocks, to be frank. We've had a camp out there. This company has had a camp out there, I think, for 18 years, since the first discovery hole. This is before KEFI got involved. And we've never had an employee punched or whatever. You'd think that the people were being bludgeoned every day if you read some of the news, but we have people working out there every day, and no one's ever been punched or anything like that over 18 years. But mobilizing hundreds of people and hundreds of millions of dollars requires, first tier discipline, systems, rigor, and that's what we're installing around this to make it, watertight for everybody. So I don't think people should get discouraged by the constant references to security by our company. We're just being honest. If this wasn't a frontier market, if this was been in Australia, we'd be probably rehabilitating a closed down site by now that has finished its production. But it's not. It's the first development of this nature ever, and the first development of a major mine for over 30 years. So being the first mover brings its challenges, let's say. So we're doing things with great discipline, but I don't think it should perturb you, if you like, that we keep referring to these things, because we're just being honest. Thank you.
Perfect, that's great. Can you guarantee that no money will ever need to be raised on AIM to develop any of the projects?
Superficially, with respect, it's a silly question. I'm not aware that anyone should invest in a pre-production company expecting never to have to give it any money to do anything. But I well understand the sentiment, and I respect the sentiment. The sentiment is this sector has been in the doldrums for a long, long time, since 2011, I believe. The index for this sector has gone down from 200 plus to minus something, I believe. And our stock has done almost as bad. And at the same time, we've been traversing geopolitical turbulence and frustration. And yet we have all this upside. And, shareholders appear to fear anyone raising money more than lusting for the upside, if I can put it that way. So it's a risk-off market, I suppose, in a one-liner. In a risk-on market, people will be looking at our £54 million a year cash flow to our share from Tula Kapi and saying, by golly, look at that. It's more than the market cap is today, and it doesn't even put anything onto the Saudi assets. This is a screaming buy if it was a risk-on market. So I can understand that frustration. And without making light of it, I do challenge anyone to find a company that has amassed more financial support from other parties for our shareholders, from banks, partners, and others. I don't know of any. Now, we have to close these deals for you to see it in reality. But all these parties are not doing their work with a view to closing on some sort of jolly. They want to get on with it and make money. These development banks in Tula Capi have been working with us for 5 years. They went through the troubles of the country and they stayed with us. They want to do this. It's their job to help develop the country. And we should be, I suppose, when we close, we should be honoured that they backed us and our shareholders. So, I'd like to turn the question on its head and say we are raising nearly everything from other parties, and therefore we have a duty to those other parties to protect everybody, our shareholders as well as the people putting all that capital together. I hope I haven't sounded too much like a soapbox on the soapbox, but it's important to stand back and see what we're trying to do. And if you don't feel comfortable, this is a difficult, high risk, high return game, and one should always stay in their comfort zone. I strongly recommend that, but it would be ridiculous for a pre-production company to make a guarantee that it will never raise money from shareholders. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Harry. What is the current cash burn rate in Tulu Kapi on the one hand and Saudi Arabia on the other?
Well, in Saudi, in our announcement today, in anticipation of this type of question, we made it clear that, in effect, we're being carried, in terms of cash burn by the major partner. There are various quid pro quos which we described, and it's all for the greater good. But there, the cash burn today is zero. Not forever, but for the moment, and for the foreseeable future as we put these things together. In Tula Capi, it's £200,000 or something like that per month. We have facilities. We've used them before. We're up at about a bit over £1 million, I think, drawn as we speak. So there's capacity there to carry us. So that's what we're doing. We're blessed. We're blessed. We really are. And all shareholders should know that some particular shareholders are particularly supportive and provide advances as working capital on the way through because they believe in us and they back us and support us. We pay them interest, but they deserve it. And that's what we're doing to do what we're doing. Thank you.
Perfect. The next question here. Ethiopia seems to be running into another military confrontation. There's been serious developments emerging between Ethiopia and Somalia. As this development has a bearing on the overall security situation, please can you comment on how KEFI and the government plans to develop Tulu Kapi into a mine while security forces have to deal with issues on multiple fronts at once?
I think it's stretching a long bow to link negotiations with Somaliland to have access to the Red Sea with security around the side of Tulu Kapi. There's no real direct connection. There's the security we need at Tulu Kapi. We'll have private security. We have people working there every day today in the camp. And going forward, when it's a fully established camp, with facilities in construction, production, and so on, there'll be a private security force inside the mining license area, unarmed. It won't need to be armed, and there'll be regional police and security and federal more broadly out and about in the region, and that's it. It's not. It's sort of belts and bracing it, but it's not like there's attacks or anything like that on us. And even, none of the actors, none of the conflicting parties in Ethiopia have ever attacked us. Quite the contrary. It's evident in their behaviour. Just seeing is believing that all of them want this project to go forward because the community wants it to go forward. And if the community wants something, nobody stands in the way ultimately of the community. I know it sounds a bit ridiculous to say that to some, but it is the truth that the community ultimately will command the authority over who does what to anybody. And if we maintain our goodwill, we've built a school, we've provided water supply, we've been transparent, we've any number of things we've done. We're good guys and nobody wants to hurt us. So I wouldn't worry too much about the Somali land negotiations over a port on the Red Sea.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Harry. What will the KEFI board do to increase its alignment with shareholders?
Well, that's a good question. At the end of this webinar, I know the organisers usually conduct a poll and ask for suggestions. So I'd really like to see some suggestions. We have obviously we comply with the law with regulatory announcements, and we comply with the law with stepping down from the board regularly and putting ourselves up for re-election if shareholders want. We have webinars. No, there's no law about having to have a webinar and answer questions. Please tell us what else we can do that you think we should do. We spend a lot of time managing stakeholder relationships that you don't see because most of the money is coming from other stakeholders. So I'd be talking to the lead banker like at least 3 times a week, for example. Now, a lead banker who's organising a $190 million loan package, you'd have to say, should get a higher priority of time allocation of an executive chairman than a small shareholder. I'm not being disrespectful. Obviously that's the case. So we spend an enormous amount of time on stakeholder management, but if there's something we can do to improve shareholder relations or alignment, we take it very seriously and we welcome any suggestions.
Perfect. Just turning to the next question. How long will moving people living around Tulu Kapi take?
Well, it's a 90-day statutory period. You only start the statutory period on financial close when the money hits the bank account, so to speak. You issue the notices, and the people have 90 days. Now we might have them ready to do it a bit quicker, but that's the statutory period. But the 24-month schedule has that 3-month schedule built into it, if you like. And all we're doing now is making sure they're ready to receive that notice. We don't want to be accused ever of walking up to a household and handing them a notice without them knowing exactly what's going to happen, where they're going, and all that sort of stuff. So what we're doing now is preparing them to receive such a notice, and it's a 90-day statutory period.
Perfect. Please comment on recent tantalum exploration applications by KEFI in Ethiopia and the strategy.
Well, I think it's open. What do you call it? The website of the Ministry of Mines is open to see who has registered applications over things, and one can see that we've done that. It's not that we're about to go into the lithium business, to be honest, but in the world of looking around at a country that's way underexplored, only 25% of the country has been mapped, and nothing in a modern sense. Mapped, I mean geologically. And because of the troubles of the last few years, the industry has been in disarray, and it's only starting to emerge from that now. So we've had a team in place which knows the country extremely well, and we've been doing quite a bit of research and pegging and talking to provide more opportunities for shareholders in the long term, or more opportunities to form joint ventures with others in the longer term. That particular initiative, that's the questioner asked, is a property along strike of an existing operation where there's some corporate mess there, there's litigation, and we just pegged a clean 100% of the same geology along strike. And we wish our neighbours the best. We want them to get cracking, get going. And then what we'll do is, as everybody knows, the battery metals industry is booming. We'd look at introducing more people into the market in Ethiopia who are specialists to follow suit on our property. In the meantime, we can shape it up geologically. So a bit of opportunism, sort of while the cat's away type of thing. The rest of the world's looking elsewhere. We're positioning ourselves for the surge in Ethiopia, as we have been in Saudi Arabia.
Perfect. Does the community resettlement need to be completed before the definitive documentation can be signed? And if not, what stage of the resettlement must be reached before definitive documentation can be signed? And when is this likely to be achieved? A few parts to that.
No, they're not connected. They're not connected. Only the estimate of the compensation is part of our documentation, but the implementation of resettlements not to do with the documentation. So we'd be signing documentation, triggering drawdowns, and then triggering resettlement.
Thank you very much. How and when is the community resettlement to be funded? Does the company need to fund this even in parts prior to the signing of the definitive documentation?
It's part of the $320 million funding package. It's just part of that.
Perfect. This investor would like to know how many families you have identified so far that are unwilling to relocate, regardless of any compensation the company has offered.
None.
Perfect. Harry, we are approaching the hour. I don't know if you wanted to take the time now to address some live questions, or if you wanted me to continue the pre-submitted questions.
How many more are there pre-submitted?
I'd say around 10.
Oh. Well, can you skip over any that look like I've answered them already? You judge, and just ask me something that you don't think we've touched on.
Yeah, okay. So this is an assumption. The senior lender banks are either Africa Finance Corporation and Eastern and Southern Africa Trade and Development Bank. Is this still correct?
Yes.
Perfect. What is the immediate plan for getting the outstanding approval from the second bank?
It's happening.
Perfect. Are there any known blockers currently stopping the second bank from confirming approvals ASAP?
No.
I think the rest are repetition. So Harry, at this point, if I could just ask you to open up the Q&A tab, read out those questions, and then provide a response. I'll pick up from you at the end.
Scroll to the top of them. The first one is there a chance for selling royalties to raise finance? So a lot of people who will do this. Not really on the Tulu Kapi one, because the government royalty is 7%, and it would be onerous to load up. It wouldn't be safe for KEFI and its shareholders. But in Saudi, royalties are very low, and that could be a possibility. If the joint venture thinks makes sense. Next one is, one way of improving shareholder content would be when making placings, giving rights to existing shareholders. Why is this not done? Well, it's a really good question, and I've always failed to give an answer other than the following, because no one has ever shown me what else we could do that would be any better. But we honestly can't remember making a placing more than about 10% below market, but I could be wrong, but I don't remember. And anyone could buy in the market at any time. And the problem with placing to small shareholders is it takes a hell of a long time to organise well, first of all, you're not allowed, regulatory-wise, you're not allowed to approach I forgot the regulatory expression, but there's a term for professional investors or sophisticated investors. They're registered, and you're simply not allowed to approach the retail public for placing. Simply not allowed. And rights issues simply don't work on name. I have never seen a rights issue on name, and I've always been advised against it. If anyone's ever seen one, please show me one. So we've always wished we could, but we're stymied from knowing how you could possibly do it on AIM. And last time we were advised to offer through something called primary bid, and we organised it. We did what's normally done, and I think it raised £200,000. So a company isn't going to develop these multi-hundreds of millions of dollars projects going around raising £200,000 after great effort and through an organised platform. So I don't know. And if the asker of the question could recommend something that's practical or feasible, maybe it could come in through the poll, because we wish we could do better on that, but we just don't know how, to be blunt. And I don't think it's through our stupidity or ignorance, but I don't think the system, frankly, facilitates it. What's the cash burn? I've already said that. Have you explored many different choices of financing? Yes, I guarantee you. We've always got, I would say, at least half a dozen proposals in front of us, which we work through methodically. Sorry. I think I've pressed a button. Can you turn that off? How you turn that thing off?
Sorry, Harry. What can you see in front of you? Harry?
Yeah. What I'm saying is that these questions are being asked orally by the machine, so to speak. Maybe we can shut this down, organizer. I don't know how to do
Hi,
it.
Harry. What I might do is I might just refresh your browser, bring you back in, and then
Okay.
hopefully that
Okay.
flushes the issue out. Ladies and gentlemen, do bear with us just while we bring Harry back through. Hi, Harry. If you could just open up the Q&A tab again, that'd be great. And just
Yeah. I've got it open, yeah.
perfect. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I obviously, it's not the system, it's obviously me pressing something that activated a voiceover. There are questions here that were covered in the RNS, which I'll just keep skipping over because it seems to be quite a lot. More about resettlement. When does the second bank approve? what needs to be signed off for security. Well, let me explain that. We do our job out on the project, in the transport routes, at the site, and we're monitored as to if there's any incidents, and we're monitored as to what our plans are for stepping up the activities, and we're reported against to the outside parties. That's as simple as it is. So it's not a matter of a security expert turning up and watching us for one day. It's a matter of monitoring the country, monitoring the incidents in the district, monitoring how people handle themselves, and what our plans are and how we've modified them, which is why we've had Constellus monitoring us for years. And because obviously if there was no publicity about any conflict in Ethiopia, I think the topic would be far less sensitive. But because there is publicity about security in Ethiopia, albeit, no problems like there were a few years ago, I think you'd have to say you should understand and sympathise with the banks wanting to be extremely conservative, albeit that their mandate is to help a developing country develop, particularly new sectors like mining in Ethiopia. They're understandably extremely concerned to ensure that they're not taking unrecognised risk or ill-considered risk, and therefore they have to monitor for some time. And but what we're doing now, I think we've explained, and they're monitoring us. And then if they see everything's gone well for the few months and we've had no problems of any significance, and our plans are still intact or been modified accordingly, then they will approve. And I honestly think it's what anyone would do. Safety first. We never risk a life. And you have to ask yourself, as a shareholder, as an executive, or as a banker, or as a contractor, would I send my children out there to work? Is it safe enough for my children? And if you think that through, you would say, well, give me a proper report on it. And not just a one-day exercise, monitor for some months and give me a proper report. And that's all that it is. It's nothing more than that. I'm not petrified about it, but that's all it is. And I think it's very frustrating that Ethiopia misbehaved for all of us for some years. Very frustrating. I certainly didn't plan to spend most of my time dealing with what I've been dealing with for the last few years. I'm not complaining, but it's very frustrating. But we're professionals and we'll do what's required to make sure we start up safe, and that's all we're doing. That's all it is. Cash burn, working capital in Saudi and so on. I think we've answered that. What do you expect the next announcement to be? And when we're pulling together, I've been in Saudi for a week or so, and for another little while, and we had lots of reports and discussions over the last week as shareholders and board and management, and it's quite a lot that's been reported and tabled on exploration that we're now getting that pulled together into an RNS to put out for our shareholders, so that as soon as that's ready, we'll put that out. That'll be our next announcement. If you don't achieve your financing by your set dates, will you stand down? Well, I don't think anybody's more impatient to get on with this than the management team. I think trying to shoot bullets at an individual who's taking questions is not really the game here. But the issue is here that nobody's more dedicated than the team, and we're on the ground feeling it day to day, and the country has made it clear, if I should be so bold, as to quote the new Minister for Mines, who used to be the chief executive of the Roads Authority, and so he's used to project management and Gantt charts and having to make projects happen. He's that kind of person. And when I first met him, and from time to time, he reminds me that he's the project manager on his side of the desk for the government side, and you're the project manager, Harry, on your side of the desk. And if we don't jointly deliver this project very quickly, neither of us will have our jobs any longer. That's his attitude, and it's my attitude. I'm not interested in hanging around spinning wheels forever, frankly. So you won't have to worry about me hanging around. But I'll finish this job. We'll get this into production, and we'll have succession built into the company fairly rapidly. But there's no point appointing people ahead of triggering the thing and making sure that we're on the way. When will the definitive agreements be signed? I think we've gone through that stuff. We lost 5% of TK today. Challenging whether we own 75 or 70% TK. Please don't be so. I know this sounds silly to say this, perhaps, but it isn't intended to be. I don't think it is. We haven't closed the financing. We are putting up a fraction of the development capital, and we're hanging on to 65, 70, 75, 80% of the project. We'll see how smart we are and how hungry others are to back us. So the question here about why did you lose 70, why did you go from 75 to 70%? Well, we haven't even closed the thing yet. So, I've been very open that, and if you look at the slide, it says very clearly the final percentages will be based on the final deals done, the final pushing and shoving and refining of the deals between us all. We get the second credit approval. We then get into a huddle and, beat each other up in the equity side of things, structure it up. We got a pretty good plan, pretty well agreed principles. But don't get so obsessed about, whether it's 70 or 75%. Is Jeff Rayner still involved? Yeah, on the Ethiopian side. He's got a conflict of interest in Saudi now. Where would you dual list? Open competition. I wish it could be in Saudi or even Ethiopia. It's a long story. Time doesn't permit today, I don't think. You'd be surprised. Both Saudi and Ethiopia, but they're not deep markets. That's the problem. In the Western markets, there's thousands of investors looking at them every day. And most of those investors don't look at Saudi or Ethiopian markets. Ethiopia is going to launch its stock exchange in June, they tell me. And they want us to launch 1 or 2 or 3 offshoots in that market to develop a stock market for mining. So, we've got any number of ideas, but the stock market is playing such a small role in our funding. We just don't have time to focus on stock market listings. Our time is spent on closing the deals and getting going. But I feel that we should dual list somewhere. And to be honest, last week it changed again. The Saudis put some more enticements on the table to look at Saudi. So I think we'll just keep playing it, just keep playing it whilst we don't have to make a decision, play it out whilst we focus on the main game. Okay, Harry, when are you looking to retire? I feel like I'm going to retire in 20 years. I don't know. Making cheeky comments about me having to retire or something. Have you overpromised in the past on financial closure? Are your current realistic? Are your current timescales realistic? Are there likely to be further delays? Well, we never publish any timescales or guidance if we think they're wrong. And yes, in hindsight, you'd say that in the past we were wrong. Were we wrong because we intended to be wrong? No. We were wrong in the last, since 2018, the situation in Ethiopia kept surprising us, and that's the truth. And it blew our timetables. That's the truth. And if we were more fickle people, we would have folded our tent and left the country. Would that have been in the best interest of shareholders? I don't believe so. Did we earn the sort of loyalty and respect of the syndicate to stay together? Yes. Do we believe they'll close in the timescales we're now working towards? Yes, because that's what we've been discussing together. But I really see no point in crying over spilt milk. The country had a civil war. If you think that this company and its management were capable of doing everything despite a civil war, then you're just expecting too much of any company. And I think that the fact that we're here as really, I don't know there has been no other project go forward, let alone internationally financed one to those standards in Ethiopia in the mining space. So we're doing something, for the first time. I know I've said all that before, but I keep getting asked the same question. Will you, person asking me whether we go to the market to raise money again? I think these are ill-founded, repetitive questions. I think that's the end of it, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, Harry, that is right. Thank you for answering all those questions from investors. And of course, the company can review all the questions submitted today. And we'll publish those responses on the Investor Meet Company platform. But just before redirecting investors, provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to yourself and the company. Harry, could I just ask you for a few closing comments?
Well, I'd really like to express appreciation for the people, riding the turbulence of the stock markets and the sovereign risk issues that we've had to ride. Words can't express the appreciation of the support we've received from shareholders who've been long-standing, as well as the other people involved from the other organisations I've mentioned. And I think that the climax of blockages in Saudi, I think, is now publicly obvious, ended a couple of years ago. And that anyone who's following the mining space would know the crowd has rushed into Saudi from international quarters. And it's obvious to anyone that the climax of turbulence and distress within Ethiopia climaxed a couple of years ago, coincidentally. And I think it's obvious that we've not only hung in there, but we've kept improving our projects, strengthening our team, and preparing ourselves to launch. So it's been a torrid affair, but the leverage is huge. The upside is imminent, and the appreciation of support will, in my view, be matched in short order by the demonstration of results, because the two countries are allowing us to get on with it at last. And it's fantastic. It's not that the company didn't want to get on with it, but it's only really the last couple of years we've been able to get on with it. And so we've rounded up our capital, rounded up our people, our contractors, and now we're ready to go. So I do appreciate the support and the patience, and I look forward to celebrating with everybody at an appropriate function in the not too distant future. Thank you very much.
Harry, thank you very much for updating investors today and being so generous with your time. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of KEFI Gold and Copper PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation, and good afternoon to you all.